All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to BLAW Live on this Tuesday evening. I'm so glad to have you with us. And we just wanted to let you know that we're glad you took the time to just be part of our discussion tonight. We're going to be discussing some really good um, topics and principles on BLAW Live. And so tonight, as we're going to work on this particular topic of spiritual gifts, it really is a dovetail for the sermon that we that Pastor Virginia just shared with us on Sunday. So we're going to kind of delve in a little deeper. Sometimes it's really important that you just kind of just pause for a moment and dig in a little deeper on a concept and a thought that the Lord has put into your heart. And so tonight, as we're talking about spiritual gifts, we're thankful that we are able to just kind of talk a little bit more about that and how you can actually find your spiritual gift. Mm-hmm. And so just kind of jog your memory about the sermon yesterday. It was quite a wonderful sermon that gave some really important principles. So just want to just give you some of what I call the head points, or what I call the topics in terms of the sub points of the sermon. That every one of us has a spiritual gift, mm-hmm. and that every one of us has been given this gift by the Spirit of God to accomplish God's purpose in the earth. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we learn how to work together. Mm-hmm. That working together, we can actually do more for God and more for the Lord than we could do on our own. And so the lessons that she went through was just basically 4 lessons that we learned, that we have to stop comparing ourselves to other people. Mm-hmm. That when God made us, He created us in His image, but yet He created us unique, in that we're all unique. We are all special, that we have the DNA of God in us, but we're here as people, not to compare ourselves with each other, but to really accomplish what the Lord wants for us to do. Secondly, we got to find our place. It doesn't do you any good if you have a gift and know what your gift is, but you really don't have a place to serve. Mm-hmm. The Bible also tells us that a person's gift will make room for them, mm-hmm. and it will bring them before great people. The third principle is you have to learn how to be interdependent, that all of us who have gifts, we are not capable of really functioning to the capacity that we should function at if we try to do it alone. So ministry is not something that you can do alone. It's what John Maxwell said. He said it's a team sport. Mm-hmm. So when we start talking about spiritual gifts and the giftings that we have, the question is, how does that plug into others' gifts, and how does that work with others, that we need to be interdependent? Mm-hmm. And then fourthly, we need to be giving honor to each other, that mm-hmm. there are some gifts that are much more visible than others, mm-hmm. but yet, although those gifts are not as visible, doesn't mean that they're not important. You can see my hands, you can see my eyes, mm-hmm. you can see the features on the outside, but of course I need my heart. My heart mm-hmm. is on the inside of my chest, and thank goodness that it's in the inside of my chest. It's still beating. Mm-hmm. And we need to let you know that a lot of what happens, even in terms of what people see, mm-hmm. it wouldn't happen without the people that you don't see who are behind the stage. Mm-hmm. So there's an on-stage ministry and there's an off-stage ministry. Mm-hmm. And so those are the 4 principles. And if you haven't heard the sermon, I want you to go back after our time of sharing. We want you to go back to that broadcast in that sermon on working together that was shared on Sunday, and you'll be blessed by it. So welcome, Dr. Ward. We are here to talk about spiritual gifts. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? My wife is here. We're going to talk about spiritual gifts. And so what do you got to say to us as it relates to trying to find our place? What would you have for us to know about that?
Well, I think it's important for all of us to, even as you ran through the points, and thank you for having me on your show, to first understand that we all do have some gifts, at least one gift that we need to be using, that none of us can say, I don't have anything to offer, because sometimes we either go the extreme and we think we have it all, or we go the other extreme and we don't think we have anything to offer. Right. And that's something that bothers me when I meet Christians, and especially Christians, and they're unclear about them having something to offer, or they see it as such a small thing. Mm. And I think it's important that we see it. We see that we all have a gift, and that we need to be discovering that gift and then using it, not just letting it sit on the shelf, not just allowing ourselves to not use them, but we need to be exercising them, and also being active about discovering them. And I also believe that in different seasons of our lives, there are different gifts that come to the surface. So you might have a gift that is prominent in one season of your life, but in another season of your life, another gift kind of comes to the surface as you continue to exercise and walk and use them out.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about this whole idea of just also finding your gift,
Mm-hmm.
and does your discovery of your gift come gradually, or does it come like all at once? Okay, this is it. This is it.
I think for some people, it's a mix of the two. Some people, through prayer, or they have a spiritual sense, this is what I believe is my gift. Others, it manifests earlier. So I think for some, it might be they know what it is. And then others, it kind of comes in a process. So I think it depends. I don't know if there's a one size fits all answer for that. And there are some who know that may be hiding. And then there are others, for instance, I think of like a Saul that had that gift of leadership, but was hiding, really didn't want to do it, but the people demanded, as it were, and the Lord appointed him as such. And so I think it's important for us to be mindful of that it may be something that you discover gradually, and it might be something that, yeah, okay, I know I have the gift of evangelism, or my spiritual gift is this, or my spiritual gift is of leadership. And maybe the place isn't as readily understood or known, but I think it's the gamut.
Can people have more than one gift?
Mm-hmm. But nobody has all the gifts.
Nobody has all the gifts. Yeah. Okay,
right.
so we can have more than one,
mm-hmm.
but you don't have all of them.
Right. Because I know I've met some people who, and you're talking to them, and I'm asking them about their giftings, and they're like, "Oh, I have all fivefold gifts, or I have all the gifts," and it's like, no, you don't, because the Bible tells us no believer has all gifts, but everyone has at least one.
And that's very good. So what would you tell people, and tell our audience tonight, that they may know their gift, mm-hmm. but somewhere they're not necessarily finding a place where it fits? I know you mentioned in the message yesterday that everybody's gift is not necessarily confined to the four walls of a local church. Mm-hmm. And there are some that actually are able to express themselves outside of a local assembly. And so what would you tell people if they're not able to necessarily find their gifts within a four-wall context of the church? But how can they also impact the church as well as have impact outside the church? Okay,
great question. So I would say that there are people, for instance, I use the gift of leadership. So we have a number of people in ALC at Abundant Life Church who have the spiritual gift of leadership. And it's not just that they have the gift of leadership to be running a church, to be a pastor, but they're gifted to lead in the marketplace. They're gifted to lead on their jobs. They're gifted to lead maybe even in their communities. So while leadership is a spiritual gift, it may not necessarily manifest within the four walls of the church. You could be a leader and in another sphere, in another realm of your workplace or marketplace, but not necessarily leading something in the church, but you still have the spiritual gift of leadership. And that is something that God gives, is that gift of leadership. Yes, leaders can be groomed, and yes, leaders can be made. There was an argument years ago about, are leaders made or are they born? And I say they're both. And there are others, scholars, that would say both. Some people are just naturally born leaders, and there are others where the gift of leadership is within them, but that gift still has to be sharpened. It still has to be honed in on. Right. And those gifts of leadership can be discovered not just in church, but in another place, in another environment where that leadership gift really shines forth.
And that's really important, because leadership is a gift. But there are also other gifts. So maybe give an example of some other spiritual gifts that people may have, but they don't understand, well, how does that find a place to be used effectively in their given context, whether it's a
Mhm.
marketplace
Mhm.
or whether it's at home or whether it's in church.
Okay.
Um,
So another example of spiritual gifts are administration. So there are some people that are administrative gurus, meaning they like things in order. There are some people who are just gifted to see, oh, this is chaos, or this is crazy, or if you line this with this, with this, with this. And they're not necessarily the front speaking people, but they are called to line things up in order. They are called to keep things moving and going. The gift of administration. That's another spiritual gift. The gift of teaching. There are some that are like people know them, but there are other gifts that you don't necessarily think of as spiritual gifts. The gift of knowledge, where you just have knowledge and even wisdom. So you have you have the ability to know special truths, and so that's word of wisdom, word of knowledge. Those are spiritual gifts. We know about prophecy, we hear about that often, but then there's a spiritual gift of discernment where you're able to recognize things and you're able to discern something that's good, something that's evil. You're able to see something for the truth of what it really is. There's a spiritual gift of exhortation, where these are people that are encouragers. There are some people, they're just gifted to encourage. And when you're around them, you just feel lifted. You just feel like, there's the gift of shepherding. And these aren't just pastors, but shepherds are people who look out for the welfare of others. And generally, like a good deacon would have the gift of shepherding because they're concerned about and they care about people, and they want to make sure that they are included and that they're loved and that they're cared for. There's also the gift of faith. And there's some people who will just believe God for great things, where others will go, oh, I don't know about that. But faith is also a gift. Evangelism, people who are called to share Christ, and they're able to share the gospel, the good news, Christ, in such a way where people come to faith that if you or I or somebody else shared it, they might kind of look the other way. There's also the gift of giving, where there are some people that are just called to give, not just of time, talents, but of treasures, where God blesses them. And philanthropists, generally people who we know as philanthropists, they have been gifted to give. Think of it as that way. Yes. And then also hospitality. I'm just going to read a couple more. Hospitality. There are some people, and although we as Christians were all called to the gift of hospitality, just in case you didn't know that. However, there are some people that are specially endowed. They know how to make their homes beautiful. They make things look really beautiful. They're good with cooking. They're good with just everything that entails people feeling welcomed and comfortable. And then there's a gift of mercy. There's a gift of helps. And there are gifts of apostleship also. And those are some of the gifts, but those are all spiritual gifts. And those are gifts that help to either bring order or correction. They're either team gifts, they're enabling gifts, they're empowering gifts, but all of those are examples of spiritual gifts.
It's good. So as we're learning about these spiritual gifts, there's so many of them. And when we start thinking about how do we actually deploy those gifts and how they actually function. When you read the book of Corinthians, which is actually a book of correction, they had gifts and they knew that they had gifts. Well, Paul said, I don't want you to be ignorant, so he tells them about it. But when they came into a setting of worship, it was chaotic. Right. It was they didn't know how to work together. And because they didn't know how to work together, having all those gifts didn't really profit them very much because they just didn't know how to work together. So let's talk about, how does it all function and work together? Because if all we have is gifts and people have these, from apostleship to prophets to hospitality to leadership, administration, etc., and we don't know how to function. Right. It really is a really great loss to the kingdom, and the church really can actually be very a confusing place to be and a very frustrating place to be because we really don't know how to work together. So talk some more about how do we think about this whole process of working together, I guess.
great statement. So I think that is something that churches and we, I don't want to say ALC is perfect here. I think we're still learning and growing in it as well. I think it has to first begin with an understanding of what the gifts are and how they function. So understanding that gifts are, while they are all spiritual gifts, there are some subcategories. There are some leadership gifts. So you have the fivefold gifts: the apostle, the prophet, the evangelist, the pastor, the teacher. Those are like the leadership gifts. Those need to be working together in agreement, and then, as it were, set framework for other gifts. And so the gifts, making room for the gifts that are, as the text talks about, that are more comely, that are more in front, making room for the gifts that aren't as much in front, and then saying, this is how we work together. And so there's some humility that's involved, because regardless of what your gift is, you can't think that you're better than somebody else or you don't need somebody else. And so I think that we have to first understand our gift. And then once we understand our role and our giftings, then we have to understand our gifting in relationship to another gift. So say you are part of the fivefold leadership gift, it doesn't mean that you don't work with people who might have, say, an enabling gift, or have a team gift, or one of the other types of gifts. So I think that once you know what your gift is understanding how to relate to somebody else. And then 3, walking in humility, so that you can say, okay, right now, hospitality is in full effect. So I'm not going to tell hospitality what to do because I have a leadership gift. I'm going to show you how to do this. No. Let the people who know and run hospitality, they need to be taking the lead in that aspect, and the rest of us humbly connect and work together with them. But then it doesn't mean those in hospitality just say, well, we know what we're doing and we don't necessarily want to work with the people who are mercy people. I think it requires humility, and it requires us all to be able to connect and work together accordingly.
And so when it comes to coordination, how does this whole coordination work? And I know that when you have all of these different gifts that you have in the ministry, it has to be coordinated. It has to be organized. It has to be structured. All of our systems, as you mentioned in your message, we have 11 systems. Well, there's a coordination to all those systems. At least in my brain, is part of that organizational part of that kind of helps everything to function. So what might be like the anatomy, would you say, of the brain and the functionality of the other parts of the body spiritually, that how does that actually be attained? Will we function really well?
Well, biblically, the structure again is given through the fivefold ministry. So technically, the leaders of the church, or the leaders of that, I should say, particular church or body, should be working together to identify, well, this gift is over here, and how we help identify that is, so at ALC, as people became members or started coming to the church, they were offered the shape, or the spiritual gifts inventory. So everyone was asked to fill that out. That was actually a part of their, was recorded somewhere on their membership folder, as it were. And so then that gave us ministry leaders an opportunity to say, I need somebody, for instance, if the ushers say, well, we need some ushers. Well, we want to get ushers who are what? Gifted in hospitality, who maybe have the gifts of exhortation, who are like to give, because there's a certain profile of a gift mix that you would want to have in place as an usher. Same for, as I mentioned earlier, deacon. You want deacons who have the gift of shepherding, or have the gift of mercy. And so, because these are the types of people who are going to serve in that area. So leadership, as it were, would sit around. Those are the part of the fivefold, and or ministry leaders would sit around and first have to identify, these are the gift mix that I need in this ministry to serve. And then once that's been identified, then people, as they've taken the inventory, should be approached to say, oh, we really need a good administrator here. Those of you with the gift of administration, we really should have someone with the gift of administration in every ministry so that there can be some order and not chaos. Because sometimes some of the gifts, very creative, do these kinds of things, but there's no order, there's no structure. So those with the gift of administration can be deployed everywhere. So the brain, as it were, I would say would need to be those that are in leadership over the either ministry leader or the fivefold ministry of that particular church. Some churches I know even have a coordinator that just helps people to identify their spiritual gifts and then helps to give them people information about where they think they could best serve based on the gift mix that they have. So I think the importance of assessments in that realm as well. So spiritual gifts assessment, but then also some of the other assessments that we've done can help people to see, well, this is my makeup, and it helps to determine what might be the best place to exercise those gifts.
And that's really good. So you mentioned shape, right? And when we talk about shape, we're in a pandemic right now, and we don't have necessarily our classes like we normally have. But we're going to be going back to how we actually help people find their place in ministry. So what is this whole SHAPE acronym? What is it? What is it involved? We just talk about SHAPE.
Okay, so SHAPE stands for, the S stands for spiritual gifts. The H stands for hot passions. So while there are spiritual gifts that we all have at least one, all of us within us, we're all wired by God and with a certain hot passion. And that generally ties in with the spiritual gift. And we're going to have an example of that in a few minutes. The A stands for abilities. What gifts do you have? What's your capabilities? What capacities do you have? What are your abilities? The P stands for personality. So you will have certain gifts, and all of those gifts will manifest differently, even as I mentioned in the sermon that you and I both have the leadership gift, but it manifests differently based on our personality. So your personality is a part of your shape also. And then E stands for the experiences. So we all have different experiences through the jobs, through our homes, through academic standing, and all of those experiences come into play as well.
Well, that is so true. When you think about your personality, everybody has a different way and a different style. So that though we could have many different teaching gifts, and let's kind of look at a teacher. There are many teachers, but there are certainly different types of personalities, unique abilities of teachers. Some teachers are better with adults. Some teachers are better with children, ages 2 to 5. Some are really good with middle school kids, but they're all teachers.
Yes.
And so there's enough room for everybody, even if they have the same gift. But it can be applied in a different way because of the person's personalities, their abilities, and even their experiences, what they've done. So that's really unique in way of helping people find. And I know Rick Warren was really the foundation for all of that. So he gets the credit. I mean, I think his insight on just helping people find their gifts was really a godsend. It's really helped me because I've read a number of things that help me to kind of discern where my giftings are and what God has given to me. And I just do it differently than some others would do it. And it makes me unique, and also the way they do it makes them unique. So we can learn from everybody, but certainly you're your own unique personality and person. So those of you who have just come on, or maybe with us from the beginning, if you do have questions about spiritual gifts and about your particular gift and how it's used, certainly send it through. Put it in the chat box and let us know. We're here to answer your questions as well, and we're excited. So we're going to talk about some resources, and I know that we've been dealing with a lot of different resources to help us find our gifts. And so we want to share it with you as well, because there's a lot of different ways that helps us to bring out an understanding of our spiritual gifts, our heart passions, our abilities, our personalities, and also the experiences we have. And so there are different models by which help us to identify where we actually fit. So for one, I know you've been talking about disc profiles. I know you can do that in your sleep. There's like disc profiles. How does a disc profile, what does that disc profile help us do as it relates to knowing ourselves better and knowing the gifts that God has put into us. What is that about?
Well, there's a tool. It's called the DISC profile. There's also a biblical DISC profile, the DISC. So D stands for dominance, I stands for influence, S stands for steadiness, and C stands for conscientious. And what it does is it measures those 4 areas and how you like to get things done, but it aligns you with the spiritual character, with the biblical character. So you can see, say you might relate to Paul or you might relate to Esther, and you can see in the Bible how someone with a similar gift mix to you, how they would live out their faith, as it were. Mm-hmm. And so I like that tool as an assessment to help to see how you like to get things done and how you like to function. There are other tools as well that are available that we use that may or may not be scriptural in nature. So such as strength finders, that's a great tool to use as well. And it helps you to see a top 5 strengths, and you can unlock the other 30 or so strengths, and you can see how that mixes together. And so these are a couple of the assessments that we're going to be doing going forward as we go into 2021 to help people dig deeper into who they are, and then to put all of that together with what I like to do is a personal mission statement. And some of you have participated in that, where we've gathered people together to challenge them to not just look at their job or their ministry's mission statement, but what is your personal mission statement? Do you have one sentence where you can explain what God is asking of you or what he's asked of you? And each of us should know what that is. And that personal mission statement should be in alignment with your ministry, with your job. And for some, the reason why you're frustrated and maybe like, I don't know what I'm doing, or am I really making a difference, is because you don't first have clarity on your mission, your personal mission. So I think every individual should know their personal mission statement as well as their spiritual gifts, and then be able to continue to build upon that through different assessments like the biblical disc, like Strength Finder, to be able to grow in your giftings.
That's good. So I just want to let you know that we also going to have a brief testimony from Greg McGrath, going to be talking about his discovery of his spiritual gifts. Meanwhile, what I'd like you to do, put in the chat box if you have taken a DISC profile, or you have done the strength finders, or if you've done the spiritual gifts test, or if you've done Myers-Briggs,
any
assessment tools, because there are a lot of assessment tools out there. I know that we did the golden retriever, the otter, the lion. We did that with Pastor Chandler, and that was really helpful to find out who we are, whether we're a beaver, and all those things are really helpful to figure out how we work together, because those are very important, because people also ask us, how can you, meaning me and you, we're different in many different ways, as you can see, we're very different, but we know how to work together because we do understand our strengths, but also where we have weaknesses, and say, okay, you're not strong in these areas, but you're very strong in these areas, and we have to complement each other, not necessarily compete against each other. So maybe you're out there today and you've taken some of those analysis and taken those different types of testing to see where you're at. Just if you would just be so kind, put it in the chat box for us and let us know what you've taken, and if you have taken some that we didn't mention, let us know so we can check that out. It might be worth for us to also investigate that. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Brother Greg McGrath, and he's going to share a word with you. Hey Greg, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
We're good.
All right. We can't hear you. Can you turn on your mic? We want to be able to hear you.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Good evening.
Hey.
I would just like to share my testimony in how I started to discover my gifts. You know, when after I became saved, you know, and coming to church every Sunday, I kept hearing the word ministry, ministry, participating in ministry. I didn't know what I was, you know.
Mhm.
Started to think about it a lot. I started to wonder. I started to ask questions. I asked, you know, counsel from wise people, you know, and I still didn't know what it was. I was praying all the time. I knew I had something to do. I know there was a purpose, you know, in me being there. I was watching how God was changing my life like completely.
Mm.
And it was amazing to me. And it's just a feeling, you know, something needs to be done. You need to be doing something, you know.
Mhm.
And hearing the word ministry, participate all the time. You know, I took the assessment test, you know, and it was amazing to me to see stuff identified in myself that, you know, that qualities that I have that I didn't even know was ministries, was things I could, you know, be doing, you know, helping, for instance. You
Mhm.
know, I knew that's the Christian thing to do, be a helper, but I didn't know it was a ministry.
Right.
You know, I knew craftsmanship was you know, it amazed me to start to see these words,
Yeah.
you know. So I had a lot of anxieties. I was new in the church, didn't know nobody, you know. I'm not the outgoing, you know, type. That's not my personality. So I had to take a big step. I had to break down some anxieties. I had to go. I went to Pastor Virginia and I said, I want to join the children's ministry, you know. I like helping. I started out as a helper, you
Mhm.
know, started helping out the children ministry. I see it needed a need to do teaching. I did assistant teacher. I started to expand my capacity,
Yeah.
like grow continuously. Yeah,
Mhm.
and, you know, and and as I grow, and here I'm thinking I'm helping other people, but I was helping myself also
Mhm. Good.
because I started to build, you know, kingdom character. I started to develop, I started to practice a way of life that I never did before,
Mm.
you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
You see, and being able to discern some of the kids them needs, seeing the kids them, seeing the need for a good environment around them. I started to walk on the church, walk on the children's ministry area, the nursery area, totally transformed that entire area into a you know, into
Mhm.
a well-used area. Its potential, the area has a lot of potential now, you know. And it doing ministry and practicing it continued to grow me. And when I started to practice my craftsmanship and I started to apply myself, I started to humble myself even more and keep seeking, knowing that I'm stronger than this, so I could do more. You know, I wanted to do more. I wanted to keep growing bigger and stronger in my spiritual life, you know. And then God started up to in my humbleness and humbling myself, God started to give me visions and started to show me certain ways he wants things done, you know, developing it in the children ministry, doing the structure, the building, you know,
Mhm.
taking charge, you know. It helped me build leadership. And I just started to add on to my gifts. So, you know, where we started off at something simple, searching for one gift, I started to add on and add on and add on, becoming spiritually stronger,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm continuously walking myself and searching myself out to define myself clearer and clearer and keep humbling myself to see what God want to use me for.
Mhm.
And it's been an amazing experience, you know. It's great, you know, they're teaching the kids and they just, them eyes just looking at you and you actually giving them life, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and when to see them come up and look around and see everything looking nice, I took my craftsmanship and applied that.
Right.
You know, I committed to something that I never knew, but I had to step out that anxiety of
Mm.
of of you know, being just a laid back kind of person. You
Right.
know,
Right.
it took a big step. It was scary at first, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the first, it was like the first day on a job, you know, that
Right.
nervous
That,
feeling, you
yeah.
know. But
Yeah.
you grow into it, and you know, it God blessed me with so much spiritual like revelations, you know. The Holy Spirit reveals you know, a lot of wisdom and knowledge that just keep me rising continuously, you
Right.
know.
Right. Right.
So you know, and as I develop more gifts, as I develop my gifts more, like I say, and now that we in this COVID
Mm-hmm.
season, I had to change the way I do stuff. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
Right.
the way we do ministry is not the same no more.
Right. Right. Right.
God took down everything
Yes.
and broke it apart so we could reach people in different ways now, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
And this the knowledge and wisdom I gain from practicing my ministries, I'm able to do it outside the church. I'm able to
Yeah.
expand, you know, my capacity even more. You know, I took the humbleness and the willingness to
Mm-hmm.
serve God, and I took that to my job. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people see a difference in me. You know, I took
Wow.
those characters just from practicing. You know,
Wow.
different ministries.
Right.
So it's been a great experience. It broke down a lot of my anxieties.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
has been truly a blessing to you know.
Wow.
Wow, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got the benefit, as of course, Virginia and I, we got the benefit of watching it
Mm-hmm.
all happen. Just
Yeah.
just gradually, just getting big and growing,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly you and Tony have been a blessing to us in many different ways, producing 100th anniversary to
Mm-hmm.
taking care of the renovations for our office spaces, and just they look gorgeous. They're just
Right.
incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So God has really blessed us with your gift,
Yes.
and we need to know that we're all our gifts to others,
Mm-hmm.
and so when God gives us a gift, we are to be gifts to others. That means we give ourselves away. We
Mm-hmm.
give ourselves as gifts to others,
Mm-hmm.
and we wouldn't have it, unless you were willing to step into your gift and step in and use your gift.
Yeah.
You were intimidated or wasn't paying attention to your gift or just
Mm-hmm.
didn't even acknowledge your gift, we wouldn't have the manifestation
Right.
of what we have right now,
Right.
being able to talk to an
Yeah.
audience on this platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what gifts do. This is what gifts do. It brings about
Mm-hmm.
change and brings about benefit for everybody
Mm-hmm.
who will actually be able to partake of that. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for being part of this discussion. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you got a question for Greg.
I do. I do. What would you say to others? So you mentioned that you had to work through your anxieties because even you're kind of you prefer to be chilling in the back and helping where you can. But so there's twofold. One is what would you say to someone who's dealing with that same anxiety? Because I've spoken to a lot of people that are like, I get nervous. I get nervous. So if you could address that, and then also the leadership. Secondly, you talked about how it helped to grow your own leadership, not just at church, but also at work. So if you can speak to those two areas, what would you say to somebody with the nervousness and then how the gifts just kept compiling?
Okay, with the nervousness and the anxieties, I would say do your assessment. Find the stuff that you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
If you have things that you're good at, that you feel comfortable doing, that bring it and let it be a blessing to someone. You know, you would be surprised when you apply a little, how that could continuously keep growing. You see, and my nervousness and anxieties I had all my life, you know, and stepping out of that and just taking the lead. You gotta make the first step. You gotta put in that work. You gotta go forward, or else you're gonna be stuck doing the same thing over and over in the same routine. You gotta grow and keep moving forward. Find something that you're good at.
It's good.
And use it to help somebody, you know. You know, it doesn't have to be in the church. It could be anywhere, any aspect of your life, you know, and use it to be a blessing to somebody.
That's good. That's good.
That's really powerful, especially now, because in where we are, and some of our viewers, they may not necessarily be in our particular state or our city, but where we are in Cambridge, Boston, Massachusetts area, we're not in our building, and we're not in our building because of COVID-19, and we want to make sure that everybody's safe. We're doing our media team is there, and we're teaching the word from there. So we're using it as a studio per se, but we're not meeting and gathering as a congregation. I really miss the congregation from gathering, and it's now been 10 months, and it's going to be more. And I believe that the Lord is not saying, hey, you know, just because you can't have a church service in the building doesn't mean that you can't be church. You can't be the church. You can use your gifts, and you can still steward your gifts. You can still help people. You can still minister to people. You can still touch people through your gifts, even though you're not in the building. All right. So what I would say, even the ushers, all right, even though you're not in the building because you're not ushering anybody, what can that hospitality do for other people? And how would you minister to them by just sharing with them and touching them in a special way? That because you do have that gift, you just have to learn how to express it in a different way.
That's correct. See, the world is in crisis right now, and when the world is in crisis, they look for answers. And if we develop ourselves as strong kingdom people, we could provide those answers, and which would lead people to Christ.
True. Well, thank you, Greg. We're so appreciative. I want to also publicly thank you for and for those of you that just heard him say the space, the children's space is so beautiful. I remember when you came to me and you said, I have a vision, I see this. And I was like, okay, go for it. And at first I was like, okay, he has a vision. Okay. But then you were like, yeah. And you told me about your plan. And then I was like, you know what? I trust you. Just do it. And you literally just ran with it. And then you had one snag, and it was like you were trying to clear a hurdle, and it was like, look, I need freedom to work. And it's like, dude, you got freedom to work. What you need? You need money? What do you need?
Because you know, I saw the vision, you know, that God wanted me to complete. So I had to make sure I finished that.
Yes.
I had to make sure I finished it. That's another part of me speak, you know.
Yes.
Complete what you start.
Yes.
Right?
That's good.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes. You didn't pass the ball to anybody. You didn't drop the ball in anybody's lap. And even though it got hard, and I think it was one point the team had picked one set of colors, but that color didn't work. And you said, nope, that's not the right color. And you made the adjustment. And for those of you that haven't seen it, and we'll get you some pictures, but for those of you that haven't seen it, it's beautiful. The space is awesome. And if you watch Kids Corner, those pictures you see at first are the actual space that Greg changed and did. So I know our children are grateful. Plus also for you to be a male role model, to have a male instructor. It's important. We felt it's important for kids in the city and kids in the community to see a male leader, so that it's not just all female led, but they're hearing a male's voice. And it's something, especially in the development of a young boy, to see an adult male who loves the Lord, who can express it in using your gifts and talent. So we're grateful for you. We're just so grateful.
All started just by identifying, you know, just some of the characters you have, some of the, and you could run with that, you know.
Good.
That's awesome.
Good advice.
But thank you, Greg. Appreciate your testimony tonight. And you're
Thank you very much for having me.
You're
Bless you.
welcome. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bless you.
Have a good one. So that was a very powerful testimony, wasn't it? And he and his wife are one of our couples that really have been a blessing to us, and we have others that have been blessing to Abundant Life in so many ways. And you know, when I think about spiritual gifts and I think about all the things that God has invested in us, he's invested in us so much that it really would be a travesty for us not to be able to deploy our gifts and our talents and our abilities in whatever sphere he has called us to do it in. And I believe that what God is doing is shaking the church up, where we are not just confined to a space, but we are just being released to do some great things for God in different aspects and different places and different spaces. And so we want to encourage you to do that as well. You know, God is not limited to a building. Wherever you are, you can be used by the Lord to bless someone and to be a blessing in so many different ways. So if you do have a question, we want to know and we want to hear it. And if you do have something to add to it as well in terms of resources, certainly let us know. We're here to learn, and we're so glad that we can take this opportunity to share this. So when it comes to your thoughts on, you know, what might be next, if you kind of in a space where, all right, I don't know and I need to know. A person knows, and what do they do next? A person is actually functioning. Is there anything they can do that's, you know, will keep them growing? Because I know that, Greg, you talked about, you know, I just kept growing. Yeah. So what are the things that you might say for those different levels of where people might be in terms of the next steps?
Okay. Well, first I would say if you don't have a clue, I would encourage you, even as Greg just said, begin with prayer. And then after prayer, take the assessment, take the shapes. You can email info@alccamb.org. You can use our church app and send an email and say, I want to take the shape test. And we'll shoot it out to you so that you can at least begin to see. These are the giftings according to this particular assessment. Now, again, it doesn't lock you in a box, but at least it begins to take something that's foggy and begin to give some clarity to it. So I would say if you don't have a clue and or you're not functioning and using your spiritual gifts at all, start with prayer, take the assessment. Then say that you've taken the assessment and you have your list and you have your shape, but you haven't activated it, as it were. You're not using those gifts. And maybe COVID kind of threw you, because as you gave the example earlier, maybe you're like, well, I'm an usher. I was at the front door of the church. I was in the aisle. I was ushering, making sure people get to their seat. Well, I can't do that physically anymore. And even once we return to church, you know, I'm not sure what the usher will look like going forward, or even a greeter. How can I translate that gift in COVID? Because the scriptures don't say that, you know, we have gifts and they're only to be used in the church building, or they're only to be used outside of COVID. Even in COVID, our gifts should still be used. The question is, how should it be used? So I would encourage you to, again, go back to the space of prayer, but then to have a conversation, maybe talk with the people that you were serving on that ministry team with, and say, maybe the ushers have a conversation with each other to say, we were ushering before, but now COVID, we can't. How can we take this gift? How do we take this gift mix and use it in digital spaces?
Yes.
And maybe some of you that were active, even, you know, maybe working with youth or children's ministry, young people still need to be ministered to, even in digital spaces. I know our youth leader is carrying a lot of that weight, and I'm sure she would be glad to have some other people helping to reach out and connect with young people, or to connect with our children, or connect with families, or people in the community. So your gift can still be used in digital spaces, just used slightly differently.
Yes.
For those that are active, so like even for us with our gifts, we're saying, all right, we have this gift, and so now how do I now use this even differently? How do I now take it to the next level? So part of what I encourage people to do is, now all conferences are available online. So we should still be attending conferences and webinars, and not just for work's sake, but listening to sermons and listening to master classes and podcasts that can help us to strengthen and sharpen our gift. We also need to be calling and checking in with one another, with people who either have a similar gift or maybe even people who have a different gift, and say, okay, how can I help you? How can I be of help to you? And how can you be of help to me? Some of you know we've been praying and saying we need additional administration gifts, because there's so much more that we're called to do as a ministry, and it can't just be limited to a handful of people. It needs more hands on deck. And as Greg said, I would encourage those of you that you have identified your gift and you are walking in, be consistent with it. Finish it. Take it to the end of what the Lord says. If you're supposed to be praying and you're an intercessor, pray. If you have the gift of hospitality, figure out how you can use hospitality even online and be hospitable. However, be as consistent with it as possible. Don't just say, oh, well, I'm in chill zone, because I hear this from a lot of pastors and leaders, that a lot of their members are in chill zone. They're like, oh, we're not at church anymore. I'm kicking up my feet on Sunday, and I'm not doing any work. And so those gifts are still to be activated, and who knows, and used, and who knows what other gift God might have awaiting for you, as Greg said, which was awesome. The gifts just kind of kept compiling and they kept growing, because as he exercised and even stepped further into the gift, he kept growing and growing and growing. So I just want to encourage you in that regard as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And the thing about it is, the more you are actively using your gift, it seems like the more God gives you opportunity to use your gift, because he makes room for it. He just says, all right, you want to be used, I'll make room for it. I'll cause it some doors to open that weren't open before, some opportunities. And sometimes these opportunities are not just volunteer opportunities, some things are paid opportunities.
Yes.
These gifts work at jobs and places of business. When you think about Joseph, he had the gift of interpreting dreams.
Yes, right.
He had the gift of he was a dreamer.
Right.
He had a gift of interpreting dreams, and look, he was brought in a powerful position where he had the stewardship of the food resources of Egypt. And it is so interesting that God used him and used his gift even to bring him before great people.
So parents, be mindful of that. You might see a gift in your child. So Joseph was a dreamer at home. Then he became a dreamer at work, and then a dreamer in the palace. So be mindful that your children, that gift that you see in them as a child, it's making room for them even as they grow.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And so for those of you who are wondering about your gifts and what they are, and if you know what they are, that you want to just use them. You want to just make sure that you are using everything that God has put in, invested into you. That tells you something about you as well, that you're valuable. You're valuable. So anytime you may think, well, I don't think I really have much use to anybody, remember that God has put a gift in you. And because he put a gift in you, he's also given something to you that you can use to help other people. And so we come to this position, right? Just in a moment, what would you say about this whole connection of how our gifts work with an assignment?
Okay.
What's an assignment? So if I think about Moses, for example, he has a gift. He's a shepherd, but he's also has an assignment. And God gives him an assignment, of course, to go and deliver the children of Israel out of bondage of 430 years of slavery. And how does a person connect their gift to an assignment?
Well, I think that goes back to understanding what your mission is. And I'm pulling up here. There are 3 stages of our mission. And this is according to, there's an author called Richard Bowles, and he wrote the book, What Color is Your Parachute? And this book is used to help people as they're trying to determine, especially if they're making a career change, but it's really great to help people to discover their purpose. And he talks about finding your mission, or as you're talking about your assignment, that it's a learning process, and it comes in 3 steps, 3 stages. So the first stage is that you have a mission on earth like everybody else, and it's to stand hour by hour in the presence of God, and it's to enjoy God and to see his hand. So we're all called to do that. But then once you begin to do that and you really seek out his presence, then there's a second stage. And then this is where you help to make the world a better place around you by following God and listening to what he has to say. But then there's the third stage, and this is where I really believe you find your assignment. Now, that third stage it's uniquely yours. It belongs to just you. So like Esther, like Moses, like Peter. So even with Peter and Paul, when in the Bible, when Jesus, when God was like, okay, your mission is to the Gentiles, but your mission is to the Jews. They each had a specific assignment. And that assignment helps us. It allows us to exercise the talents that God gave us, and it allows us to do it in a certain place, but also for the purpose that God has done. So it's a threefold. That third level of the mission has it's the talent, it's the place, but it's also for the purpose that God has for us to do. So you can't discover that assignment if you're not being obedient to God, and you're not listening to him, and you're not functioning in this in just pure love and obedience for him. It's difficult for you to hear what he's trying to say to you, because you can barely be obedient and you're not loving in a loving relationship with God. So I would say first, I would tell that individual, pause and examine, where are you at? Because I know for me, when I was living my own space of disobedience and doing what I wanted to do and rebelling and running from the call of God on my life, on one hand, I wanted to know my assignment, but on the other hand, I was running from what I knew to do. And God's like, well, I need you to do this first. I need you to be obedient to prayer. I need you to be in a space where you can hear from me. And so as I began to do that, more and more of my assignment started to become revealed to me. But it was only after obedience and loving God, loving my neighbor, loving others. And so I would encourage you, and if you're like, well, I still want to talk further, this is what other people who are ahead of you in the faith or ahead of you in that particular gifting, reach out to them and say, I believe I'm called to teach, or I believe I'm called to, or like you might say, like Greg, I believe I'm called to function in the ministry of helps. Give Greg a call. I just put you out there, Greg, and say, I want to talk to you. How did you, work through that anxiety, and how did you put that gift of helps to use? So reach out to the people who are ahead of you and let them help coach you and mentor you and shepherd you through it.
Yeah, that's important, that we all are nurtured in our giftings, because they definitely need to mature. We're all on this, I know I haven't matured in everything that I haven't been invested, in my life. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to keep doing? What do I need to learn to keep growing, so that I can add value, so that I can continually be a blessing to other people. And so don't ever think that you have arrived. And that's really the important thing. There's always a space where you learn, where you grow. You'll make your mistakes, of course. And when you make a mistake, and when you feel it like you failed at a task, you don't just kind of count yourself out the game. You learn from the mistake. You ask the questions. You take some inventory, but you don't spend your time beating yourself up.
I'll say more about that. Have you ever messed up a sermon? Have you ever
messed up so many sermons? It's like it's too many account. But sometimes when it comes to sermon mess ups, God can be very gracious to you. And somebody comes to you and say, you know what, that's the best word I ever heard. And I said, that's not the best word ever spoken. That's for sure. And then the other side is, you might have thought that you did a good word, and there's nothing else out there. It's purely just God's doing, and how he blesses people as you might share.
Don't give up.
But you don't quit because you had a bad message. You just keep on plugging, keep getting better, keep learning, keep getting more instruction, watch others. You don't necessarily have to be like others, but you can kind of study the principles of communication as best as you can. And you know what? God is faithful,
Mhm.
and he's, he can bless our mess ups, and he can bless our mistakes, and he can bless
Yes.
us for just getting out there and trying to do. I mean, think about Peter. I
Mhm.
do give Peter credit when he, on
Yes.
that day when he was out on that
Yes.
boat,
Yes.
and he said, "Look, Lord, if that's you, I'm gonna get out the boat."
Mhm.
And he started walking, but the wind
Mhm.
started coming, and he
Mhm.
started looking at the wind and the waves and just the danger of it all. And of course, he started to sink. But I do
Mhm.
give Peter credit; he got out the boat.
Right. And even Peter, when he denied Jesus, and Jesus told him, "You're going to deny me." And he denied Jesus 3 times. And even when all is said and done, Jesus has the fire by the lake there, and Jesus, Peter comes to him, and he's like, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" And Peter, the Bible doesn't give us the account of the narrative between Jesus and Peter, other than Jesus asking Peter, "Do you love me?" And that's what it came down to. And if you love God, no matter how bad you mess up, child, I can throw both hands and my feet up. I just want to speak to somebody who you feel like I've messed up. I've started operating in my gift and I messed up. It's done. Repent of it, put it at the foot of the cross. Now pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and say, "Lord, how can I be used of you?" And there's no failure in God there's no failure in God that he won't redeem. You may have lost it, you may have messed up, but don't stop there. Don't stop. If it's sin, repent of it, turn from it, and walk before God. He still has need of you. He still wants to use you. There's place for you in the body. There's place for you at Abundant Life. There's place for you in the kingdom of God.
Yeah, it's and if you want to know about mess ups, read the biographies of those that God used, from Abraham all the way down through David. I mean, this is Dancing David. We talk about David, who says that he was called as a man after God's own heart. He had his mess ups and craziness going on, families that are backgrounds that were really just dysfunctional, but yet God redeemed it. God can redeem, God can bless, and God can use us. So we want to encourage you that you and I and all of us here, we are on a journey with God, and we hope that this session, this broadcast of BLAW Live, was a blessing to you, to encourage you to find your gift and get on mission. We're going to talk more about mission. I think we want to talk about mission and do a little bit more on mission.
Yes.
I know you want to do next week mission?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll do next week on mission. How's that? We're going to be back on mission next week. So we're going to talk about mission. And I think it's very important that we talk about mission, particularly as we've had this most difficult year, where, in some cases, a lot of people got forced out of jobs, and a lot of just chaos has happened because they're not able to do their normal everyday routine.
Right.
But maybe it's a good point to just examine the mission again.
Right.
And maybe it's important that we just say, what is that thing that God has assigned my hands to do, and the purpose that he has for my life. So come back next week. We'll be here to talk about that.
There you go.
And we're so glad that you tuned in tonight. So with that, we just want to end by saying, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you.
Yes.
May the Lord be gracious unto you and give you his peace, his shalom.
Yes.
Nothing missing, nothing broken. And may the angels of God surround you as you do the work of the kingdom. So again, look forward to seeing you back next week on BLAW Live.